earlier, so we can watch this for all posterity because you're just that good.
Love it.
All right,
If
man.
you
Floor is all
go,
yours.
Lawrence, yeah, Lawrence, fun fact, if you go one step further back in the career chain, um, I was a developer advocate at Microsoft, and one of my former teammates apparently saw that I posted about this on Twitter and is hanging out in the chat as well. Gavin just joined us, and I need to talk to Gavin because I think Gavin is back in New Orleans, and I will be in New Orleans in a couple of weeks for a team offsite for the company that you mentioned, which is Planet Scale, who I had never heard of before until my now VP went there, and my interest was piqued. And after talking to him, joined back in November. But I don't know. That's kind of the boring stuff, I think. I mentioned this right before we kind of kicked off. I desperately wish this was an in-person thing, but the benefit of this is that we get to now have people have access to this all over the world, which is really cool. So hopefully we've got some different time zones and areas and backgrounds and stuff represented with the people that are hanging out. Lawrence, you had reached out to me back in November. I had to go back and look, and JC reached out about the meetup, and I had forgotten to put it in my calendar and was trying to think about what to talk about. And a thing I could talk about all day long is career stuff. And specifically, I've talked in the past about taking control of your career, being in control of what you're doing, not just taking things at face value, but taking things for like what you want them to be and making sure that your career and everything about it is exactly what you want to be. So I came up with navigating your career your way. And so the funny thing about this is like I'm going to tell you how to navigate your career your way by telling you tips for things you should do for your career. And the flip side of that is like just take what makes sense from this and apply it to you. And if it doesn't make sense, don't apply it. That's actually one of the tips that I'll have. And I started listing out these tips, and they started growing and growing. And I created sections, and I like eventually I think I want to make like a 100 tip, like I don't mini course or something that I could get out, just everything I could think of that I want to share with people in their careers. But this is about 30-ish tips. And who am I? James Q Quick on Twitter. I've been a developer, speaker, and teacher professionally for some combination, for about 10 years now. And then I am a staff developer advocate at Planet Scale. And I really kind of summed up everything that I do into this tagline is I teach developers through content. I'll talk a little bit more about this in a few minutes, but a big part of my personality, a big part of what I do is teaching. That's what I get inspired by. That's why I wish we were in person more to be able to interact with people in person. But there's lots of virtual opportunities to do that as well. But I teach people through content. And as we go through these tips, there's a few things that I think are important to understand about my perspective on careers. Some of them, I don't know how to caveat it. Well, maybe just diving into it will be the best. Let's start with number one. First one is no matter what disadvantage you're facing, don't lose the mentality that you are in control. And I want to be really clear that like there are lots of disadvantages in many different ways that need to be addressed, that people are actively working on being addressed, that affect many of us and many of us differently. But regardless of what disadvantages there are in place, you can't lose the mentality that you have control over your destiny and your career. This is for me specifically. So this is the way that I approach any setback that I have in my career, any bad manager that I've had in my career, any failed test or whatever it is in my career. It comes from, okay, now I'm going to take control of this and do better next time. The other thing is, and this is like some of the simple cliche sounding stuff, is decide you're going to make something happen and then go and make it happen. And you'll see that through tips in this talk too, is like once you decide this is a priority, this is a thing that I want to do, now you have to backtrack. What are the things I need to do to get there? And how do I address those things to get to where I ultimately want to be? I also want to caveat this with like a lot of this advice is like, if you don't like your job, go get another one. Also understand that's not a super easy thing to do. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to, you're not going to start maybe with your favorite job of your career. It's not going to be easy, but pointing yourself in the right direction and working on those steps to get to where you want to be and whatever that end goal is something that you have to keep with you. And you have to make those things happen. No matter how long, no matter how difficult, you have to work to make those things happen. As you're doing that, ask yourself, every day. If you have this big goal that you feel like you haven't accomplished, you feel like you aren't where you want to be, ask yourself every day, have I done everything I'm capable of to make that thing happen? Whatever it is, whatever I've told myself in planning and preparation I need to do to get there, ask yourself every day, are you dedicating yourself to doing that thing? It could be eating better. It could be working out more. It could be losing weight. It could be making more money. It could be getting a new job. Whatever that thing is, reflect with yourself to ask yourself, are you doing everything that you're capable of every day to make that thing happen? This is a side note. I copied in a slide from a previous presentation. And so this magic here, it is not related to what I'm about to say. But in the comments that you can't see, the speaker notes, the comment is, you no longer have to write, deploy, and host your own server. You just have to write a function. This slide was originally from a slide deck of serverless. And serverless, you write code and magic happens. And that's why the comment is there. But the magic here is in relation to, those are cliche philosophies. But the more I've learned about cliches in life, the more seriously you take them, the more magic happens. Like if you keep a positive attitude, you'll be more positive about the things that you do and the setbacks that you have, and you'll be more prepared to overcome those things if you maintain that mentality. So you'll start to see kind of a magical transformation, I think, if those are the things that you believe in and you act on them every day. So in this talk, I would like to have your help I'll ask several questions to you, and I would just kind of like message reaction or emoji reactions inside of Zoom. So if you haven't used those before, they should be like down on the bottom of the screen. There should be a reactions button. There's not actually a thumbs down for no. So you can just use like sad face or like whatever the option is there, or just answer there. X will work for Gavin's got the red X. That'll be a good one too. So thumbs up for some of the questions that I ask, and then an X if no. So we'll break this down into 4 different sections, and it's all about taking control of and the first one is breakthrough. And so I tried to address all the comments that people left me inside of Slack, where I asked, like, what questions do you have? What would you like to be addressed? And Dakota asked about breaking into tech. And so I created a whole section for the breakthrough, taking control of your breakthrough for breaking into tech. The first thing is to do your research. If you want to get your first job in tech, do you know what first jobs in tech look like? Do you know for your given area that you live in, what's the most common language or framework in your area? Do you know what remote positions are available? Do you know what the average salary range is for someone that's getting their first job in tech based on your skill set? Have you reached out to people that have the job that you want to have? Have you done your research about what getting your first job in tech looks like? This will also influence what should I focus on to get my first job in tech. So if you know what those languages or frameworks are that are hot topics, that are hireable skills in your area, that will help you prioritize the things that you focus on if your end goal is getting hired. Now, this research concept is not going to be just in this section. We'll actually see this repeated in every section because it's applicable for every different thing that we talk about here. So we'll revisit this concept of do your research throughout the talk. The second part is to invest in your community. The cool thing is, if you're here, you are investing in your community. And I think there's like one aspect of investing in your community where you have to give time, or you have to be teaching people, or you have to give money. And kind of the short answer is like, you don't necessarily have to give anything to invest in your community. You can respectfully, selfishly invest in your community by being here, by learning from not just me, but the other people that are around you, by learning from the other people that give presentations and talks and demos, by asking questions, by just showing up. You are invested in this community, and you're going to, through osmosis, take in knowledge from the people around you, everything that they do, everything that you see. The most I've ever learned in my career is by being around people. I don't want to say that are smarter than me, because I think that's an inappropriate way to label it. People that have more experience in different areas than I do. There's so much to learn just from being here. So you can show up, you can invest in your community selfishly to ask questions and learn for your benefit. And just by being there, you will benefit everyone else as well. Now, if part of your perspective is you feel bad that you don't have anything to offer, the more you take in, the more you now have to offer people that come along behind you. Next thing is never stop learning and building. And I have another personal philosophy that maybe I should have talked about, is learn, build, teach is actually my Discord community. And the idea is you spend a lot of time learning in tech. Things never change. They're always, things never stop changing. They are always changing. So you spend lots of time learning new things. You use what you learn to build stuff. That's really a big part of why I'm a programmer, is because I like to use that to build stuff. And the last part of it is to teach other people how to do it too. Because not only does teaching help them, it also helps you. As having been a teacher myself, there's no better way to gauge your understanding of something than when you try to explain it to someone else. So never stop learning and never stop using what you learn to build stuff. And then from the teaching perspective, share constantly, share that with other people. And you think about, if you are looking to break into tech and you want to get a job writing React, right? Most people's concern is, I don't have anything Reacty on my resume. I don't have enough experience on my resume. Well, what are you doing to show that? What are you doing to prove that you have experience in React, that you have knowledge in React, that you want to work in React? And what you do is you share constantly, build yourself a reputation around React. Everything that you learn in React, someone hasn't learned yet. Everything that you learn in any topic, someone hasn't learned. React is definitely now a word. So share constantly about the things that you're doing. Now, this may be, I do video content. That's what I prefer. It may be blog posts. It may just be tweets. It may be comments and likes and reactions and things to people's posts in different places. But if you want to be known for being in React, if you want to be a Reacty person, if you want to be a React developer, go be a React developer before you officially are one. In addition to that, fake it until you make it. And I think probably the question to start here with is, who would you rather hire? Let's say we've got two people who have gone through a boot camp. They learned about React, if we'll keep the Reacty example. Two people that have gone through the exact same boot camp, and two people show up for interviews. And one person shows up, and as they're asked to talk about themselves, they say, oh, I'm just really early on. I've just done a little bit of React. I don't know a whole lot. I just feel like I don't have much experience, like unsure of themselves and unconfident in the stuff that they can bring to the table. The other person confidently speaks about how difficult their curriculum was, how much they learned during that, how much they were able to apply to build stuff, and how they shared about that learning and their journey along the way. Which one of those people are you going to hire? Now, maybe this is fair, maybe it's not, but the way you talk about yourself goes a long way. This is actually, if people are familiar with Wes Boss, one of the most prolific content creators and someone I look up to myself in the web development space. I had a call with him 4 years ago, 6 years ago. And he, having been this prolific content creator, gave me the advice of fake it till you make it. If you want to be known for a thing, go and tell people you do that thing, right? Like, you may not be the most experienced, and you're probably not going to be, but the perspective of people who teach something, or this perspective of people who share something, is that they are the experts. Right or wrong, that's the perspective. So if you want to be known for something, go and share about it and fake it until you make it. Be that person that's talking about that thing. Be that person who is having confidence in themselves. And a fun fact here, people that have confidence in themselves, to you, from your perspective, don't necessarily have confidence in themselves. They may just be good at feigning or pretending to have confidence because it's something they've practiced. If you lack confidence, go and practice having confidence. It's a learned skill, just like anything else. Something that can help you do that is to embrace your past. People that are looking to get into tech, especially they don't have college degrees, they're worried about their X number of years of professional experience because it's not relevant. Very far from the truth. Lawrence, I'll take you as an example. I know your background, being in the restaurant industry, being in customer service. How many of those things can you take and use confidently in an interview for a technical position to show that your X number of years is applicable to this job? Because as developers, we're a lot more than just writing code. We're leadership, we're communication, we're organization, we're all these things. And Lawrence, you could use any different combination of those skills from your previous jobs, and everyone else here can as well, to apply to the job that they're applying for. So embrace your past. Don't shrug it off. Don't demean it. Lean into it and learn how to craft that story about yourself to position yourself in the best way to get that job. Next thing is to find your why. And the why here is specifically, why should we hire you? And here's a reaction moment. So thumbs up for yes and the red X for no. How many people could confidently answer this one question? if I were to ask you individually in a conversation, why should we hire you? How many people reaction wise would confidently answer that question? A lot of yeses, a couple of nos. Rhetorical question, but for the people that are saying no, why don't you have that? And I guarantee you the answer is you think you don't have a why. I guarantee the other answer is you haven't learned to articulate what your why is and communicate that to people and lean into what your why is. My why has nothing to do with being a developer. My why, if you ask me why you should hire me, my why is I'm a developer at heart, or excuse me, a teacher at heart. If you hire me on your team, I will make your team better because I like to teach people and I like to learn myself. It has nothing to do with writing code specifically. So if you feel like you don't have a why because you don't have the experience, go and make up the why and lean into it and run with it. This one's a little debated, I think, and I bold the word just very specifically because I don't think you should do development or programming or tech just for the money. I think money is a very significant reason to look into tech. But if it's something that you start to go through a couple of YouTube videos, go through a boot camp, and you absolutely hate every step of the way, it's not going to make for a great career for you. This is my personal opinion. I want to be happy with the thing I do in addition to making good money. There's lots of things that you can do in your career. There's lots of things that you can do that make a lot of money. Tech is in many ways the most accessible because of how many resources are out there, because of how many opportunities and how many people are trying to help you get there. It's a great, great, great opportunity. My advice is don't do it just for the money. Enjoy it at least as much as anything else you would do and then make more money. That's great. That's a win. This got out of order. I already did this part. That's my why. So next up, speaking of the don't do it just for the money, is take control of your money. And I'll start with one of the most cliche things I think I can say to you. If you want to make more money, go and make more money. And this is where like we should start by addressing it doesn't just happen overnight, right? Like you don't just go to your boss and say, I want to double my salary. And they're like, yeah, we definitely want to just double your salary for no reason. That's not how it works. But you have to embrace that you get to control how much money you make. You're the only person that can truly determine what your value is and advocate for what that value is. So question for you, emoji reaction time. What have you, if one of your goals is money related, what have you specifically done in the last 6 months to work towards making more money? I'll rephrase this for yes or no. Have you done something in the last 6 months that's directly geared towards you making more money in your career? So that's a 6 month span, all positive, great. What about in the last month? Same answers? What about the last week? Now let's also like embrace that this is not the biggest priority in the world, right? I'm saying this is important for you to reflect on if your goal is to make more money. I feel pretty good about the amount of money I make. That's not a priority for me at this point. My priority is not to make more money. My priority is to create cool shit and love the stuff that I do. That's my priority. If your priority is to make more money and you haven't done something specifically towards making more money in the last 6 months, 1 month, 1 week, you should reflect on that and you should look at what are the things I need to do to get there. Coincidentally, I've got some things that you can do to get there. Do your research. Negotiating is one of the toughest, most intimidating, nerve-wracking things that we can do. It makes us all uncomfortable. It makes me uncomfortable. I get to be up here and I'll have several slides on negotiating. I'll give you lots of advice. I'm not the best negotiator by any means. But do your research. If you're applying for a job, before they ask you that dreaded question of what's your salary range, one, you could say, I want to continue the interview process and kind of see what your range is. By them asking you what your range is, the employer holds all the power. Unless you can confidently say, I want this range, which is something you feel valued by, and you can back up by the market research that you've done. You can go and look on Glassdoor. You can go reach out to people that you're comfortable asking. all of us probably have a few of those friends that we can ask, how much money do you make? How much money did you make throughout your career? One of the things that's really cool with people in tech, especially on social media, although it seems counterproductive, I think it is productive for people, is a lot of people have shared, I've made this amount of money at each stage of my career. It's hard, like once you make a lot of money, it's hard to do that and not feel like you're bragging. But think about how beneficial it is if your goal is to make 150K, to have someone that makes 150K show you what their path was to get to 150K. So do your research in whatever form that takes. Always negotiate. In the last offer that you received, if people have received an offer for any job, reaction yes or no, did you negotiate in the last job that you applied for? Mostly yes, a couple no's. I again get to be the person who tells you go and negotiate. I have negotiated in the last 2 jobs that I have gotten, but not very well, to be quite honest. And the additional caveat to this, or additional tip here, is always negotiate, even if it's just for practice. Even if you're not willing to fight for it, if they say no, the best position that you can be in is you know exactly what you want and you don't need that job, and you can tell them I'm not taking a penny less than this. Great. If you're going to take that job anyway, negotiate anyway. Give yourself a chance, force yourself to ask that question that you've been scared to death in your life to ask. Force yourself to write that email that you've been scared to death to write in your past, because you're never going to get better at negotiating if you don't practice it. So every opportunity that you have to negotiate, always negotiate. But also, you don't have to negotiate every time. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense side by side. Here's the scenario that I think you should consider when negotiating. The one scenario I can think of where you, not even that you shouldn't negotiate, but you can feel comfortable, or I think you should feel comfortable not negotiating, is when you get your offer, it matches or exceeds what you already had in mind for yourself, and you feel valued and respected by your offer. It's a very personal thing. I can't tell you how to feel regardless of anything. I can't tell you how to feel based on an offer. You have to look at how you feel. Do you feel valued and respected by your offer? I didn't negotiate going into FedEx, actually 3 jobs ago, because I got exactly what I was looking for coming in. Now, looking back, I still should have negotiated, but I felt valued at what I was coming in at. Another thing you can do is negotiate more than just salary. How many people have negotiated things other than just salary? Yes or no? I came up with a few list items myself and then did some research, and there was a bunch that I didn't necessarily think of. And these are the easy things. Probably the hardest thing to negotiate is salary. These other things, depending on where you are, can be much easier to negotiate. Vacation days. That's a big one. That's huge for me. I now work at a company. In my previous company, I've had unlimited vacation. That's very, very important to me. And I want to make sure that everyone understands that I understand that's not everywhere. That's not what everyone gets to have. That's not what every employer offers. But I feel very lucky. I feel very fortunate, not lucky. There's a distinction there. I feel very fortunate to be in that position, because I never want to be in a situation where I can't take off days to go see a wedding in my family or friends, or to see the birth of a child in some family or friend, or a big event for a family or friend, or take advantage of an experience to travel somewhere with myself and my wife. I'd never want to miss out on that opportunity because I don't have vacation days. This is extremely important to me. So you can negotiate those vacation days. You can negotiate stock options if you get any. You can negotiate working from home and hybrid. There's no better opportunity to negotiate that now. You can negotiate your job title. I'll talk about that more in a minute. Your start date. It's one thing I didn't do a good job of negotiating going into my current job, is I wanted to take at least a month off. and they wanted me earlier on to be there for something specific, and I did it, and then I took the next week off, and then like it was leading into the holidays, and I like barely worked November, December, so it kind of worked out. But I did negotiate very aggressively with my start date. Flexible hours. Do you have kids that you have to take care of? Do you have to go pick up kids from daycare? Do you have to drop kids off at the office? Do you work better at night? Do you work better during the day? Flexible hours. Signing bonus, relocation costs, professional development budget. There are tons of things that you can throw in there to help yourself feel respected and valued with the offer that you get. Now, with money, one of the interesting topics is that I think you should consider changing roles or companies every couple of years. I don't think there's much debating about this, although I would be interested to have this conversation after the fact if anybody want to talk about it. The best way to make more money is to move jobs every couple of years. I just don't think there's any way around it unless you find the 100% right place at the right time, and you've got maybe you have great negotiating power with them where they are dependent upon you and they can't afford to let you leave. But this actually plays into that, because if you consider changing roles or companies and you apply and you have an offer for making 30K more and you're an indispensable part of the company that you currently work for, they might find a way to match and go beyond that. My wife had a job working at the Pyramid, which is now the Bass Pro Shop if people are local here in Memphis. And she was leaving to take another job, didn't want to stay, like was ready to go. And the manager, and this just really made me angry to be quite honest, but asked her, like, is there anything we could do to keep you here? He said, like, can we pay you more money to keep you here? And she said, no. And he said, what about a lot more money? So one of the things I'll talk about is in your career, you are the only person that can constantly and adequately advocate for yourself. That person looked at my wife as an employee that he didn't want to lose, that they knew they would struggle to backfill, that they knew they would struggle without, had been underpaying the entire time until she said she was ready to leave. How many people have left a job and gone to a different job and made more money? Probably a handful of people. Some of that's just a natural progression. So for this, you don't have to do it, but consider changing roles or companies every couple of years. In addition to that, take an interview every year or so. How many people, if you've been at your job and your current role for more than 2 years, have you taken an interview with another company in those 2 years? If your answer is no, think about if you didn't write code for 2 years. A little extreme. If you don't interview for 2 years, if you have no practice in 2 years, you're going to be that much worse is maybe strong, but you're not going to be as sharp in your interview process as you would have been had you done it 3 months ago. In addition to the fact, some company might blow you away with an offer. Going back to this previous point, consider changing roles or companies every couple of years. The way you do that is you do an interview and you find out what the details are, and then you make a decision. You might turn it down, and that's fine, but you won't ever know if you don't look into that opportunity. The more opportunities you look into, the more salaries you find out about, the more benefits you find out about, the more opportunities you have to make more money and have better benefits. Now, here's some of this might come off as I'm very focused on benefits and salary, but here's my thing. I'll put it very simply. If you could do the same exact job that you're doing now, enjoy it just as much, enjoy the team you're around just as much, but make twice your salary, would you leave? Would you go do that next thing? And my point is, I've never sacrificed happiness and enjoyment in my career. That's number one above anything else in my career. Happiness and enjoyment of what I do is absolutely number one. But I make a hell of a lot more money than I did 6 years ago, while never sacrificing on my enjoyment for what I do and who I work with. Leading into taking control of your happiness. And the first cliche piece of advice is make happiness a priority for you. Same question as before. If like you're not happy in your job or you want to improve something that you don't enjoy or want to enjoy more or whatever, what have you done in the last 6 months to improve that? What have you done in the last 3 months to improve that? What have you done in the last month to improve that? What have you done in the last week to improve the happiness that you maybe feel like you lack some in your career and your day to day? So decide that happiness is a priority for you. Even if you're happy right now, you can still decide that happiness is a continued priority for you and work towards that. Part of how you do that is doing your research. I told you this is a theme that we would revisit throughout the talk. What kind of research can you do into happiness? How many people work at a company with more than one developer team? Pick on Lawrence because I know a lot about Lawrence and his career. FedEx has lots of developer teams, right? How much do people know? How much do you know about other developer teams at that company? How much do you know about their happiness? How much do you know about their workflow? How much do you know about the pressure that they have on themselves that they feel? How much do you know about their work-life balance? How much do you know about their overall happiness on that team? And that's potentially just within your own company, right? We talked about investing in the community earlier on in this talk. By being around, and these are not just, I've mentioned developers a lot. This is not just developer titles. Let's be clear. This is a community of people that are all kind of together here. Developer being probably the most common one. By being around more professionals and hearing how they talk about their job, you can help gauge for yourself how you talk and you think about your job and the people you're around and the company that you work for. So in terms of research, go and talk to other people. Go talk to people in different roles. Go talk to people in different teams. Go talk to people at different companies. Networking is a byproduct of investing in the community. If you're networking to network, I think you're doing it wrong. If you're investing in being part of the community, you're going to network and it's going to help you a hell of a lot more. This one seems simple and gets overlooked a lot. My wife and I kind of go back and forth about this a lot. My wife is very dedicated to work. Unfortunately, she's been in a situation where taking advantage of that might be a little bit of a stretch, but companies are happy to lean into her dedication to work. And we talk like I struggle with it sometimes because I feel like my wife doesn't put herself first because she's incredibly talented. Everywhere she goes, she's a rock star. And everywhere she has been until recently, they have leaned into the fact that she is so dedicated and does such a good job. They've leaned into it. Taking advantage, maybe a stretch, but they've leaned into it and certainly accepted it. The good thing for you and yourself and your employer is if you, as an individual, are taking care of yourself and your family and what other things you have in your life first, you will then be a better employee. So this is a selfish thing that also then unselfishly, I don't know if is unselfishly really a word, I don't know, unselfishly benefits the company as well. Good managers will know that. Good managers will tell you that. I've been told that by good managers, and I've seen good managers not say that. But taking care of yourself first should be the priority. How do you do that? Great question. Set boundaries. But the important part about this is that you set boundaries and you stick to them. It's not other people's responsibility to respect your boundaries. It's not their responsibility at all. It's 100% your responsibility to make people respect your boundaries. Sometimes this is a good thing about me and a downside about my personality sometimes. I'm very practical. You may can see this from some of the things that I'm saying here, very logical. And so the benefit of that is like, I'm scared to negotiate, but I do it anyway because I know I need to. I'm scared to have that conversation with my manager for whatever reason, but I do it because I know I need to. And I don't let the fear stop me from doing what I think I need to in my career. A lot of people struggle with that. They know, I should do this, but mentally I can't, right? The downside of this is that I lack a little bit of empathy sometimes for people in conversations that we have. And it's something that I try to pay attention to and and, be more empathetic. But here's an example of that. If you come to me and you say, my boss just messaged me and it's 5:30, we're at a bar, and you're like, I need to get my computer. It'll just take a few minutes. I need to do this thing. Or we're out at a restaurant, or we're hanging out at my house watching a football game, or whatever it is, and your boss messages you and you're like, I hate it when they do this, but I need to take a second and go fix this thing. I don't have empathy for you. Like, I don't want to hear about that, because you've set the example that you're going to respond to that. Now, there is the caveat of, like, you actually get in trouble, which sounds ridiculous in a professional world, but you might get in trouble if you don't answer that email, respond to that thing accordingly, et cetera. And there are extenuating circumstances, like being on call for stuff and that's an understood situation that you have to address. For things outside of that, though, it is your responsibility to dictate when and where you do your work. And if you're in a situation, this is my personal perspective, this would be my advice to someone else, but this is all individual perspectives. But mine is, if I'm in a place where somebody messages me after my regular hours on a regular basis, not just a one-off thing, and expects me to drop everything I'm doing in my personal life to respond to them or take care of something outside of a production incident that people understandably are responsible for, that's not a place I'm going to be. And if I find myself in that place, that's not going to be a place I'm going to be for a long time. Understand, again, this doesn't change overnight. It doesn't change in an hour. It's work, and it's a process that you have to go to get out of that situation, but that's not a situation I'm staying in. So people will comment all the time, or I see people commenting about, I didn't know if I should send you a Slack message at 5:30 or 6:30 or 7:30. I don't give a damn what you do. I'm not going to respond. I don't care that you send me the message, but I'm setting my boundaries by not responding until 9 o'clock the next morning. That's 100% your responsibility to set your boundaries and to force other people to respect them. A lot of people will, but it's your responsibility to make sure that stuff happens. Dedicate time to reflection. This is one of the things I've talked about in my pursuit of happiness career talk that I think I did with this group as well. It's been a year or two, maybe. It's been a while, but happiness is not the same from day to day, week to week, month to month. Happiness changes, right? You might be happy in your job today. You might not be happy in a week or a month or a couple of months. And happiness could be relative, right? Like I would say in my career at FedEx, I was happy where I was, but I knew there was more that I wanted. So it's not that I was unhappy. It's not that I didn't enjoy the people I was around, Lawrence being one of those people. I wanted something different and more in a different way for myself personally. And so one of the things you can listen to is pay attention to the way you talk about your job and what you do. When people ask you what you do, are you excited about it? When people ask you about your team, are you excited about the people you work with and for? Do you feel respected and valued on a consistent basis? That stuff doesn't show itself if you don't dedicate intentional time for thinking about it. The other thing is to maintain outside hobbies. Be a person that's much more than just programming. These are a lot of things that are relevant for me, but be a woodworker, be an athlete, be a musician, be a gamer. I typed in my notes, a move watcher. That should be movie watcher. Whatever those things are that make you happy, I think you need time away from what you do as your job. And it's kind of a weird thing for me because a lot of my job carries over into my personal life because of how much I mix content, how much content I do on my personal time and how similar that is to content I do for my job. But that doesn't define me as a human being, doesn't define me as a person. There's a lot more that I do and I make sure that I do to get away from that stuff on a consistent basis. I think this is the last section. Taking control over your career. Number one, make your career a priority. It can mean whatever it means to you, whatever you want to change about your career. It's not going to change if you don't make that thing a priority. Gavin, watching movies since 92. Making your career a priority starts with maintaining the mentality that you will be in control of your career. Again, going back to that personal philosophy, no matter what's going on, no matter what setbacks I have, I am in control of determining what the next steps are that I follow to do the next thing that I want to do to get to the thing that I want to be at. Super vague terms there, but I'm always working towards something. Or if I'm not, I need to be reflecting on that and figuring out what I'm working towards. How do you do that? Do your research. What does career mean for you? What are your goals? What types of jobs do you want to work? Do you want to write code forever? Is that something? Is anybody? How many people thumbs up if you're in a role that's not specifically development? I think that would be great to see. Again, I've kind of referenced developer a lot, but there are lots of encompassing roles that I'm sure people here have, which is fantastic. How many out of the people who just thumbs up, were you a developer at some point previously? Couple yes, more no's, I think. Being a developer doesn't mean writing code forever. There's lots of other opportunities. But I wanted to address a couple of questions from Slack. One is from JC. As a new dev on my first job, what are the priorities for the first 1 to 2 years and how to do career roadmap for 3 to 5 years? JC also asked, does learning new skills look the same with your first job as when you're learning to code? Coriano asked, with so many things to learn in tech, any recommendations on what new developers should focus on in 2022? And here's the really key part of this talk that relates back to the title where it's focused on you. The answer to all these questions is you tell me. And you tell me based on your research. If you know you want to get to a certain job in your career, what research have you done to get there? And then use that to influence what are my priorities in the first 1 to 2 years to get there? What are my priorities or what is my roadmap for 3 to 5? How many people have you talked to that have a roadmap similar to the one that you want to understand what your roadmap could be to then backtrack and say, I need to do these things to get on that roadmap? How many people have looked at it? How many people have had a job in mind that I would love to be a solutions architect at some point or whatever that role is? How many conversations have you had with people in that role that you want to have to figure out how they got there and what they did and what their experience and their background is? Does learning look the same with your first job as when you're learning to code? You tell me. Do you still have the same goals a couple of years in? Or your goal, it may not look different. Your goals for getting your first job may continue to be the same goals. I'm going to continue to work on those things because that's the thing that I need to get to the next level in my career. With so many things to learn in tech, any recommendations on what new developers should focus on in 2022? Do your research. What are the jobs like? What's the market like? Who's hiring? What are they hiring for? And use that to prioritize if your goal is to get hired. Otherwise, just have fun. But I'm assuming most of it is about getting that next job. Next thing is to advocate for yourself. No matter how good of a manager, no matter how good of a team, no matter how good of a friend you have in your corner, they will never be able to advocate for yourself the way you should advocate for yourself. I've had great managers. I've had managers that will advocate for myself or for me. That doesn't take away that my responsibility is to advocate for myself because no one's going to listen to you if you don't advocate for yourself. Going back to the example with my wife and leaving the pyramid and them, oh, we'll pay you a lot more money. The opportunity was there, but they weren't going to give it to her unless they had to. If someone overlooks an accomplishment of yours, let them know that. That's a tough conversation to have, right? It makes people nervous and you feel rude and stuff. It's one of the benefits of me in my career is being more pragmatic. I can overcome the emotional aspect of that and try to do that thing. Even if it doesn't turn out well, I know I did that thing because I thought it was the right thing to do for myself. It's a hard thing to do. It's an easy thing to decide you're going to do. If there's a promotion opportunity, who's going to advocate for yourself? Sometimes your manager will. Even if your manager advocates for you, you're going to have to advocate for yourself. There was another question. I don't know if I marked it, but maybe I can't remember if this was part of that questions in Slack or not. I think it was talking about like learning from other developers. So in your career, you will get a lot of advice. You'll get a lot of feedback, including what you're listening to right now. But your responsibility to yourself is to be picky about which feedback and which advice you listen to. I think you know who you respect. You know who you look up to. You know who you trust with advice. And if people give you advice that are not those people, first of all, consider it and then filter. Yes, this makes sense. No, it doesn't. Move on. Yes, it makes sense. What do I do with it? No, it doesn't. Move on. Be very picky about which feedback you listen to. Not all feedback is good feedback. Now, You have to consider it first, because you might be like me a lot of times where you push it off first and then slowly you're like, oh, okay, I get it now. It makes sense. So you have to consider it. You have to give that advice the opportunity to be realistic and beneficial for you. But if it's not, move along. This is a question from Lawrence, who referenced the junior to senior jump. And my response is, don't let other people determine your title. Again, it doesn't happen overnight. It's not necessarily going to happen with the next role that you go into. But if you're a junior wanting to be a senior, you have to advocate for yourself. If you're wanting a promotion, if you think you deserve a promotion, have you had that conversation with your manager to tell them, I deserve to be at this next level? Oftentimes requirements for those things are arbitrary. I became a senior at FedEx before I had technically 5 years of experience, and they rolled in my internship and something else because I was performing easily at a senior. I actually ended up skipping that level for what it's worth, because I was performing higher than a senior level as a non-senior title. And I had that conversation with my manager to say, I think I deserve to be X. If you're looking at what that next level is for you, have you done your research of what skills do I need to be there? What do I need to show the team? What do I need to prove that I'm capable of to get to that next level, to show that you're performing at the next level? Conversation directly you should be having with your manager and people that have been down that path before. The reality of this is sometimes, and oftentimes, this means, again, leaving the team or company that you're at. It's a personal decision. If like I feel very dedicated to the companies I've worked at, but I've always made a decision for myself first. So by you doing your interviews every year, by you considering other opportunities, you're putting yourself in a better position to find the next opportunity. One example of this, and again, I'm in a very empowered stage of my career, as you can probably tell. But with the job that I'm at now, talking to my now VP in interviews, he told me that I could choose my job title. Fun fact, I chose staff instead of principal, thinking that they were kind of the same thing and arbitrarily like didn't matter. And I think people more consider principal to be a higher title. So I kind of sold myself short anyway. But because of my reputation, because of going to where I was going, and because of them wanting to hire me that much, I got to choose my title. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen tomorrow. It doesn't happen in a week. It may not happen in a year. It may not happen in a couple of years. But if you're not taking control of that narrative, then you're not going to get to that thing until someone else thinks they have to give it to you, most likely, because of natural progression in your career. Another aspect of this is to take professional development seriously. One of the things that I did at FedEx specifically, I spent more of the company's money on educational resources than anyone else on the team by far. You want to know why I was able to do that? Because I took it seriously and I asked for it. It's not hard. That should be a priority for culturally for a company that you work for. That should be a priority for them to support you in building your skills along the way. A lot of companies don't make that a priority, and they're wrong if they don't. Going back to, are you in the right position? Are you at the right company? Are you at the right team? All these things for you to consider. But your company should be supporting your professional development. Now, there's a limit to that, right? Like, I don't know. I was doing a lot of like Udemy courses. So I would buy 5 Udemy courses at a time, and I would buy a course from Wes Boss. So over the course of time, like a couple grand, no one else was doing this at the time until they saw me doing it, and I saw them trying to learn something. And I was like, go tell Lois, my manager at the time, go tell her you want to learn this thing and ask if you can expense that. For companies that truly invest in you, that's a no-brainer. The really cool part about that, the selfish, even more selfish part of that, is that your company might support you in building the skills that lead you to your next promotion, your next job, and or your next company. But they still should do it regardless. financially, another piece of advice in your career is see if your company will pay for it before you do. I mentioned that I spent more of the company's money on training resources than anyone else that I knew of on my team and extent like anyone else that I had talked to and been around. It's very simple. I asked. This makes us really, I get nervous about it. Whatever it is. Oh, I want to ask for a thing, but I don't want to seem too presumptuous and blah, blah, blah. Like it's very, like it's understandable. It's a reaction that I have. It's a reaction that everyone has. It's very understandable. But you have to make the decision for yourself that you're going to ask regardless. There's a question from Dennis in Slack. What are the most important things I can pick up from seniors on day one? My response to that is to ask them about every line development, every line of code that you don't understand, and pay really close attention to their responses and how they respond to you. Two aspects of that are really important. Ask about the stuff you don't understand. Ask about the acronyms. Ask about the technologies, the terminology. Ask about those things because you're just going to fall into this thing of falling further behind and feeling worse about yourself for not knowing. So go ahead and ask from a I want to understand perspective. The other thing I said is to pay really close attention to their responses from individuals and continually evaluate are these people or is this person someone that I'm going to trust with knowledge and feedback and advice going forward. We all have like it's just part of life that like in every team that we're on, we're going to have a person or two people or a handful of people that we resonate with more, that we're more comfortable talking to than others. And we also have people that give bullshit answers and bullshit advice and don't actually know what they're talking about, no matter how much they talk about it. So as you're asking for knowledge, as you're asking for things, think about the answers that they give you and think about the way in which they do it and decide if that's a person that you can trust and continue to foster and invest in that relationship. I'll give one last piece of advice. I love, depending on time, to do Q&A. This again would be so much fun to do like an in-person full conversation. The last piece of advice, something I take for myself. If you're ever in a room full of people and there's an opportunity to ask a question, be that person that asks a question. That stands like not right this second, but that stands for this group as well. For visibility's sake, like I remember being, Gavin would have been, I don't know if Gavin's still here. Gavin would have been at these offsites with our big Microsoft team of 100 people and the VP and the GM and what all the titles were. Anytime there was an opportunity to take questions from the audience, I forced myself to ask a question. And let me also tell you that I understand what it's like to be sweating and nervous and have your voice crack because you're nervous to do it, but I did it anyway. No one's going to know who you are if they don't see and hear from you above your direct manager and teammates and that sort of stuff. Now there's a fine line. Lawrence, I don't know if Lawrence was there at the time. Like I have challenged authority, upper management in a big thing at FedEx at one point because I was trying to advocate for the broader group and I was trying to do a good thing by that. And I went a little too far. And I had a conversation with my manager after for both of us to discuss, like, I was trying to do a good thing and try to bring up these points. And both of us agreed and took it as a learning experience that I could have done it in a different way, probably behind closed doors. So there's learning opportunities. You'll make mistakes. I've made plenty of mistakes. But I was almost always not the loudest one, but I was always part of the conversation and always a person asking questions. So any opportunity that you have, whether it's one-on-one with a developer, one-on-one with your mentor, or especially in this case, in a bigger group of people, you get some level of visibility just from raising your hand and asking a question. Most people get nervous just like I do, and they don't ask. I get nervous and then I force myself to ask because I know it's beneficial for me in my career. So if you're interested in the slides, you can find them on my website, jamestquick.com/talks. Don't do a great job of updating everything that I do because I do a lot of like podcasts and smaller things, but the majority of the actual talks that I give are on there. So you can find the slides if you want to look through them. Again, jamestquick.com/talks. We'll put a link. I can share a link in Slack. I'm around for however long we need to be. I think Q&A for this kind of stuff would be super fun. So Lawrence, you tell me, but thanks for showing up. I appreciate it. I've had fun looking at a computer screen and talking for 45 minutes.
Nice. Can I ask everybody to turn their mics on real quick? Like just click that button, get off mute, because I want him to hear our appreciation for an excellent talk. Let's give it up for James right quick.
Yeah.
Make noise, act crazy. That was awesome. Awesome. James, you're always brilliant, and I can tell you're still getting better, which is a little scary. I've been listening to him speak for what, 3 years now, 4 years, give or take. That was, I typed it in the chat, and this probably sounds really nerdy, but it was the right mixture of meta, kind of thought, experiment, if, that type, and straight up practical day-to-day specific things to do. It was the right mix of that. Not too heavy either way. So that was a good job, man. Good job. And I would say that
Definitely.
even if I didn't know you.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I definitely have to bring it back to reality sometimes.
Right.
And level set that I do understand, again, that this stuff doesn't change overnight. But
absolutely. So today I learned the red X's and the green checks, they don't go away by themselves. So when you turn one on, you have to click it again to turn it off. And since James has made himself available for Q&A, I'm so grateful for that. We're going to entertain questions. What I want you to do is just hit a green check if you would like to ask a question, and I'll recognize you one at a time. You'll come off mute and ask your question. And when you do, turn your check back off. So Jabari and Matt, you might want to turn off your X, but anyone who would like a question, I could go on forever about mine, but just hit that green check and I'll recognize you one at a time. All right, Charles, you're up.
Oh, great. Thanks. All right, James, thanks for a really meaningful talk, and it had a lot of impact. I want to know, have you always been like at this, like on this path that you're on? How did you, like, since you were a kid, how did you get started, on the tech path? Were you ever doing anything else? Do you always think you're gonna be going in this direction?
no, not at all. In multiple aspects of what I'm doing, the technical side and the public speaking side, which this is part of what I do professionally, for what it's worth. On the tech side, I applied to college, applied to the engineering school at Vanderbilt, and they asked me a fun question of, what are you going to actually study after I got accepted? And I was looking through the chemistry and biomed and mechanical, and nothing really interested me. And I knew absolutely nothing about computer science. I was actually wanted to take a computer science 101 or computer science AP class in high school, and it overlapped with orchestra, which I was a 4-year orchestra student, so I didn't take AP computer science. So I declared computer science having literally zero idea of what it was, and it wasn't because I knew it was going to be beneficial. It wasn't because I knew it was going to be a great career with benefits and money and thing. It was the thing that sounded the most interesting, having no idea what the majors were. So that's how I got into it. I did, the regular computer science classes. I think one of the biggest game-changing moments for me was at a certain point, summer after sophomore year, I decided that I wanted to learn a little bit about mobile development, and someone gave me a book, and I was kind of following through this Android book, and I got kind of bored, and I decided I'm just going to have fun with this. Like, I don't know a whole lot yet. I'm just going to figure out the things I need to make a Harry Potter trivia app, which is what I ended up building. And if you've ever heard me talk about my career in the past, I have talked about that Harry Potter app in almost every interview I've done since, specifically going into Microsoft. That's probably what I talked about 90% of my interviews. So that's where I kind of got the idea a little bit, the start of like, this, like, damn the career, this is just fun and I can build stuff and that's cool. And then interviewed at Microsoft. I got turned down for 2 positions. Gavin, I don't know if you know this, but I applied for a regular software engineering role. They asked me, I still think it's a dumb question, what's the biggest project you've ever worked on in terms of number of lines of code? And I was like, I don't know. Like who pays attention to that and brings that to an interview? But you might get that question for what it's worth, so maybe prepare for it. But I don't think I came off as a software engineer in those interviews. And so I got declined for that, but they felt like I would be a good fit for the company. So they interviewed me for a TAM role, a technical account manager role. I flew out to DC in college. It's kind of a cool thing. Flew to the airport, got a rental car, went to the office, and not in Reston, maybe outside of DC. No, that's in Seattle. I can't remember which. Anyway, got turned down, and they sent everybody back to the hotel from the office that got turned down in a limo together. Very awkward, real awkward. And then they asked me about a technical evangelist role, and they asked me if I would be interested. I had no idea what that was. People probably a bunch of you aren't familiar with the idea of a technical evangelist. It's basically what a developer advocate is, which is what I do now, a mix of teaching and speaking and working with potential customers and just developer community in general. And they asked me if I was interested, and I was like, sure, yeah. And I didn't know what it was. And I talked about that Harry Potter app and started working at Microsoft, where my job was to give talks and things. And I had never been a public speaker. Like I was just as bad as any other regular college student at giving a presentation in college. And then I did it professionally. And I got super, super inspired by the people I was around at Microsoft, the startups that I would work with and see in the communities, the students that I would work with. Like I think Gavin and I probably joked about this at some point, like us going to some of these college hackathons, had those people been graduating when I was graduating and interviewed for the same, I never would have gotten hired at Microsoft. Like these students were ridiculous. And that was like game changing, I think, for me to be around people that were taking control of their career, building their own products and building their own startups and stuff. And I think that really influenced me going down that path mentally. The development stuff is ironic that it worked out that way with no specific direction, but it did. And then the public speaking and the networking and relationship management and all that stuff just came from the job as a technical evangelist. So it just kind of went from there.
Nice. I think I saw Tony White with a green check next, but it's missing. Tony, did you still have a question?
No. The more I thought about my question, the more the words changed around, and I just thought, you know what, I'll just back off and listen to other people ask them. Thanks though, James. I appreciate the time you're spending today and the thought you put into the slides and the presentation here. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Cool.
In solidarity with the talk, I want to push back a little bit and ask you, if you're comfortable, you can still say no. Do you still want to ask a version of your question, and maybe we'll have a short conversation about it?
Maybe. I'll tell you this. I don't quite follow what it is you do as part of your day job. And when
That's a great
you
question.
got your day job, how much did, well, I'm the brand James Q Quick on the side. How did that factor into you getting the gig? Did it actually work against you and you sort of had to make room for that at your current gig? So just
These
curious.
are fantastic questions. Another reason why the always ask is one of those last bullet points. So me getting the job as a technical evangelist at Microsoft was a fluke. I knew nothing about it. I mean, I earned it because I got through the interview process and they had respect enough for what I had and what I was interested in and my passion, that sort of stuff. So I earned it, but like me getting there, it just happened. Like that was nothing I took control of. It was nothing I worked towards, that sort of thing. So my day-to-day job now at Planet Scale is basically the same as what I did at Auth0, is empowering the developer community, building relationships with the developer community, and earning trust in the developer community. Super, super vague terms. Specific things that I do. I create a lot of content. I create blog posts and videos. I do talks like this. I do Twitter spaces. I do live streams. I do all these things. If people have a question, if people have a comment, if people have support for the product Planet Scale and they post that on Twitter, I'm jumping on it. Hey, so glad you used it. Is there any feedback that you have, positive or negative? That's a big part of this role that's really important, is me being, or our team being, the most developer centric people in the company, the most public facing people of this company. we are the best people to get feedback from the community on our product, good or bad. So I jump on that and I have conversations with people about the things they're building, how it's going, how they like the product, features they think are missing, etc. A big part of traditional DevRel, developer relations, that it would be the team that developer advocate falls under, is public speaking. So Gavin has done his fair share of talks and all the likes. So I've got conferences coming up the next couple of months. It's been a little odd because of COVID, so I've done more online content, but I was telling Lawrence something I'm really excited about. I will actually be keynoting a conference in London in April. And so my wife are going to go several days early, fly into Paris, and then go to London for a few days and have like a whole European trip. So the answer to the original question of what do I do is a combination of all those things. I think that's one of the things I missed in this talk, was to emphasize or continue to emphasize there's more to software development or tech than just writing code. There's a lot more to it, and there's a lot of other types of roles that are available that people can look for and start to explore and ask questions like you just asked. The other part about this is, how does the brand factor in? So when I was at FedEx, I had 3 years of experience working at one of the top tech companies in the world as a technical evangelist. That goes a long way, but I had been out of that for 3 years working at FedEx. At a certain point at FedEx, a year and a half or so into my career there, I realized I missed the community. That's where I met Lawrence and JC years ago, going to these meetups and started investing more there. I realized I missed creating content. So I started creating content on my YouTube channel again and other places. And I missed public speaking. And so I started to pay my way somewhat. Company supported me a little, but pay my way primarily to go and speak at some conferences a couple of years ago. And while I was doing that, I decided, going back to, like, I was happy at FedEx, but I knew I wanted something more and different for me in terms of the content, the community, the public speaking, that sort of stuff, and tying that all in together with programming. I decided I wanted to get back into developer advocacy. At that time, I had Microsoft on my resume, which carries a lot of weight, but more importantly, I had been doing that stuff on my own. I had been creating YouTube videos at the time. I don't know how many subscribers and things I had. I'd been creating blog posts. I had been active in the communities and things like that. So if you looked at my resume, it was a lot of those things that were sprinkled in with the fact that I had professional experience with that 3 years ago. So I would say that personal brand and that stuff completely outside of my job at FedEx were a significant factor. And there were a few people I knew that were able to refer me to the company based on having known them online. So all of my personal brand highly impacted that. And after a couple of years at Auth0 and doing that professionally and continuing to grow my personal brand, I feel like I could do anything with my personal brand. And to be quite honest, I feel like I could work at any company I want to with my personal brand. So that, like, people ask, is it necessary to create content to progress in your career and all these things? The answer is no, it's not necessary. But if you want an extra thing that you can bring to the table, a brand and content creation can be huge. It's a big ask to do it at the scale that a lot of people do, because a lot of it's outside of those work hours. But I feel like there's nothing that I can't do in my career with the brand that I've built and the opportunities that I've already seen come across that I never would have thought about before without the personal brand.
Cool. Next up, we'll go to Gavin.
Hey, James, excellent talk. I 1,000,000% agree with everything. And hey, everybody out there in the Memphis meetup. So I do have a couple of things to say. And my question, the first thing is, in keeping him honest, I can confirm that I am aware of the Harry Potter trivia app. It is a real thing. I have heard about it. And I'm also aware of the Shame Limo. One that I took a ride in myself my first time applying at Microsoft, so don't feel too bad. So my question for you, James, was you spoke to making sure that, hey, when you're in your role at your company, every couple of years, look to see what another role could potentially look like, because it is the quickest way to build out your to up your salary, assuming that that's what you want and you're looking for that new role change. I've been asked by more junior folks, and I didn't quite have an answer to this question, so I'd like your take, which is to say that there is a perception that it's possible to job hop too many times. In tech, our tenure is accelerated quite a bit, right? Compared to like a lot of jobs outside of industry. So what I've heard is 2 to 4 years, it's time to start looking, that sort of thing. At what rate is job hopping a thing that you would consider a red flag on a resume? Is there a specific time even?
Yeah. One, for what it's worth, Gavin and I literally haven't talked in person, like
I know,
or,
right? It's
or
great
seen
to
each
see
other
you.
in like years. So this is fun. So my threshold is about 2 years, and that's just it's arbitrary, but it's just what I feel is appropriate. That's not to say that I wouldn't jump for the right opportunity at a year and a half or so. I think less than a year is a little questionable. Like I've seen people make those decisions. And here's the thing that I look at too, is like, I've seen people make those decisions that I have a lot of respect for. And so when you see people do something that you're uncomfortable with, that you have respect for, the practical side of me is like, okay, if I find that right thing, I can make that decision for myself as well, because I trust that person enough to know that this is something that can be done. My VP that I work for now at Planet Scale was at Auth0 less than a year. That makes me uncomfortable. Like the thought of leaving somewhere in a year makes me uncomfortable, but I have a hell of a lot of respect for him, having worked directly for him now for, almost a couple of years. And so now I have a different perspective of I could do that, and I could feel comfortable with myself doing that if the right thing were to come up. But my threshold is usually about 2 years. So at Auth0, I was just short of 2 years. So it was like a year and 10 months or so. And I felt a little uncomfortable about that, to be honest. Like I felt like I would be completely comfortable leaving if it was exactly 2 years or beyond. But the thing I told myself is like, does 2 months really make a difference? Like in 2 months, I'm still going to want to make a change to be somewhere. My goal was to be somewhere smaller startup, earlier stage, that sort of stuff. Like that was my goal. Those 2 months weren't going to change that, right? I would just be in that situation 2 months from now. So I decided to make that decision, even though it was a little uncomfortable for me a little bit early, to go ahead and pursue the thing that I was going to want to get to anyway. So 2 years is kind of my general threshold. Obviously that fluctuates. I think you can do it too much if you're going a year with each company. That seems questionable, but also people can do it too. So I don't know. Yeah, I think 2 years is just my perspective on looking at general level of threshold for what I'm comfortable with.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
We're going to take 3 more if that's okay, James, and then we're going to call it a night.
I've got as long as you want to keep Zoom open.
All right. Well, that'll accommodate 3. Matthew, you're up.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, thanks a lot for the talk. So I had one question that relates to the very beginning, and it was in terms of doing research for positions that act as a transition into tech, but aren't specifically software development. Kind of what recommendations would you have for research into those positions or transitions? And then I had a second kind of really general question too, that if you don't get to it, it's fine. But so currently I work in academia, and sometimes, for example, I have people that are interested in pursuing grad school in academia. And there are definitely a lot of positive aspects to that, but there are also like a few things that if somebody's interested in transitioning or starting a PhD or something, I'll tell them, oh, you should really know these 2 or 3 things that are bad before you make this transition so that you're aware of them. And so in that sense, I guess I was curious, for people transitioning into tech, are there A, B, and C things that you would want people to be aware of or think are currently kind of ongoing questions or just things to know about? And maybe that's also asking for a counter evangelism or something like that. But yeah, I don't know.
You want okay. I want to ask you to rephrase your first question in a second, but let me answer the second part first before I forget that part. So things that I think people should consider before getting into tech. I think it's not a magical thing, right? Like people, I think tech gets a lot of hype because of the money, which is great. Like absolutely, like if I could do anything else and be as happy but make less money, I would rather be in tech and be happy and make more money. So there's no reason that shouldn't be a significant factor in people looking into tech. but it's also a job like any other. So I think the biggest thing for me is go through free, like if you're looking to transition, go through free resources, YouTube, free code camp, Udemy courses that are $10, like the web developer bootcamp by Colt Steele. If you did that course and you knew everything in that course, you're hireable right then. It would take time, but you're like 100% hireable because it teaches you everything you know to be hireable at that point. So I just suggest that people take advantage of free and low cost resources to see if this is something they could see themselves spending hours a week doing. And just know that like you're going to work with people that you don't like, just like any other job. You're going to have shitty managers, just like any other job. You're going to have great managers, just like any other job. It's still just a job, right? There are lots of benefits that come from it culturally, especially with modern pay and benefits and that sort of stuff. And that's a big reason why I would advocate for people getting into it. But it is just another type of job. So there's all the same types of things that come along with anything else. Does that answer the second question kind of?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Thanks.
Cool. So try the first question again, because I don't know if I quite followed it originally.
Okay, so and I think so the initial point you made was about research specific positions, and somebody in the chat I think mentioned something like not all those positions are software developer. And so I guess the very broad question is, what other positions should people look into?
Okay.
Are there positions that can act as a kind of gateway that's a different path than, for example, going to a boot camp, landing a software developer position?
Yeah. So I think one, part of the answer depends on what's the ultimate goal. Is your ultimate goal to get a job that's around programming because ultimately you want to program? I'm not necessarily asking you, I'm just saying that would factor in. Like, is your ultimate goal to be programming or just to be around tech? Because you can be in tech and never write a line of code. So a couple of types of roles that come to mind on Lawrence and I's team and Lawrence's team now, business analyst is a big one. And so a business analyst is someone, someone that understands the business's need. We often talked about dev teams versus the business. And so the business would be the people who are deciding, here are the features that we need to enable these things that will help us make more money. The then translation is, all right, now software development team, how do we build those things to enable these things that we think we need to then make more money? So business analysts are very knowledgeable about what's going on as a whole. That also, there's some programming involved with that. Like one of our principal, I don't know what Jen is now, but Jen was a principal business analyst, which is one of the highest levels that you can have at FedEx. And she wrote a lot of scripts and SQL stuff, and she just had a Linux admin background. So she had that aspect that she could bring to the table. Again, a complementary skill set. It's also something that BAs that started that had never done that before could kind of build up some of those skills too, which then they could leverage to transition into a job in programming. I think, so let's do a couple of other ones. We've got some in here. So Scrum Master as part of Scrum Master or product owner. Scrum Master is like logistically helping make sure the team has everything it needs to get a job done and remove roadblocks for the team, making connections to other team and dependencies and all that kind of stuff. You could be in tech sales. That is a great thing as well. Being able to understand a product from a technical perspective and communicate that to other people. Oftentimes, and this was advice that I got at Microsoft from my manager, to consider tech sales, because I had the personality to do it and I could make a lot more money, to be quite honest. I never did that. I never really looked into it. But tech sales is another one. There's also like every other aspect of things that you could think of. Like you could be a designer and work in tech. You could be a designer for a development team. It's not really the case for what I did at FedEx, but places that have really, really high quality external products are going to have testers. They're going to have, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, like we mostly worked on internal stuff that had to work really, really well, but it didn't have the outside perspective of customers involved. So you have to have QA and testing. You have to have design. You have to have, we work a lot with our product marketing managers. So these are people that are going to coordinate launches of new features. Hey, James, can you do a live stream to promote this thing? Can you do a YouTube video? Can we do an article to promote it? What kind of thing can we do to promote this? UI UX is a great clarifier. In addition to just design, there's the user experience as well. My wife works for Auxero tech company and does events and sponsorships. So she gets all the benefits of working in a tech culture, a modern startup, less of a startup now because it's older and been acquired, but like a startup culture, a tech company, as someone that's not technical at all, as a event coordinator and event sponsorship coordinator. So there's lots of roles in these areas. This goes back to the research aspect and the reflection aspect of what are the types of things that you enjoy, what are the types of things that you're good at, and what is your ultimate goal. I will say if your ultimate goal is to become a developer, becoming something like a business analyst at a company where you can start to write some scripts to help automate things and blah, 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 helps build up that skill set. And you can communicate with your manager to say, my goal is to become a developer one day. A lot of companies are happy to facilitate hiring from in-house for people that are looking to transition, or hopefully they are. But I've definitely heard of that being a common thing for people that are looking to make a transition, just communicating that with a manager, talking to other managers, realizing what your gaps are, working on those gaps in the meantime, then staying at the company to move into a development role.
Cool. Thanks. That's super helpful.
Yeah.
All right, down to our last two. Dakota, I believe you were next.
Alrighty. First of all, thank you for your time tonight. I really appreciate it. I'm sure I speak for everyone when I say that. So I've been working towards becoming a developer for a little over a month, and I've already found a plethora of help from the community. So my question is, as a beginner, how can I give back to the community and be part of that help that I found as a beginner specifically?
Yeah, it's a great question. Welcome. Hopefully you said you found a plethora of resources and support. That's great. This is one of the best places that I think you could be, not because of me, because of the people who are actively running the group, and I fly in and do things like this when I can. But it's an amazing community that that you're a part of here. So a couple of things that I talked about that I think are relevant is like, one, I think it's great that you're asking that question. I think some aspect of that answer is to still put yourself first. So I don't know details about like your background and that kind of stuff, but like making the transition into tech is one of the most accessible things that people can do, but it's also one of the most difficult things that people can do because it's very hard. And it's the truth. And the good thing is there's so many people around you. So the first thing is like, don't put too much pressure on yourself, I think, of having to give back in that way. Because I don't think that's quite necessary, at least from a pressure perspective. The other aspect of that is you've already done two things that I talked about, which is one, you're here. So you're investing in your community by being here. You also asked a question, and maybe not in this small of a group, but in a bigger setting. The question that you just asked, I can almost guarantee you that someone else in a bigger setting would have had that exact same question and been afraid to ask. And so what you can do is continue to ask those questions, continue to not be embarrassed or self-conscious, or you will face imposter syndrome, but try to fight imposter syndrome to ask those questions for the things that you don't know or understand, and even the ones you feel like you should know or understand, because someone else out there doesn't know that thing and they have that same exact question that you do. And by you stepping up and voicing or vocalizing your question, you've now benefited someone else. And that continues in all the conversations that happen in Slack. It continues on live things here. When we get back to in-person things, forcing yourself, continuing to ask those questions, not only for your benefit, other people are going to benefit from it too. And outside of that, like the other thing I like to share with people, as you're learning something, you're probably the best person or one of the best people to teach that thing. Because for me, I've been writing JavaScript now for 6 years, semi-professionally. And I will never fully remember what it's like to write JavaScript for the first time. I taught 2 rounds of boot camps, and we've seen like more, and Santiago's hanging out in here. We've seen more and more people get hired out of those boot camps, which is like one of the most ridiculously life-changing, cool things that I've been a part of. Rats. I got so I got so excited about that point. I lost what I was saying. What did I say just before the boot camp and getting hired? Somebody help. Emotions make you cry. I didn't cry yet. I could. But
That was a song reference. It's okay.
Okay. What did I say just before the boot camp?
Starting fresh offers perspective
Yes.
that
Thank
other
you.
people don't have.
Yes. Having taught 2 rounds of these boot camps, the thing I always hear different interpretations of what I'm teaching that I never would have envisioned. I never would have imagined. I never would have thought of them that way. So what you have is extremely valuable. If you have a perspective of someone that is learning something or has just learned something that you can then share with people, because you remember what it's like to not know that thing. As much teaching and content as I produce, I don't remember what it's like to write my first line of JavaScript. I can try, and I can try to be inclusive in the content that I create from that perspective, but I'll never exactly remember what it's like. And you are close to that. So whatever that means for you, whether it's posting stuff on Twitter, documenting your journey, I'm a big believer in sharing. Whether it's creating formal content like blog posts or videos or whatever it is you want to do. But I think at the very least, 1, don't put too much pressure on yourself, because that's what we're here for. 2, continue to show up and ask questions. And I think you've done 90% of the contributing back that would more than reciprocate the stuff that people have invested back in you.
All righty, and rounding things off tonight, Walker, what you got for James?
So I guess my question is really one that I've kind of struggled with. You know, I live in Memphis, love it here, but to fulfill like my career goals, I feel like I have to there's one company in mind that I would love to work for, but it would require me to up and move across the world. You know, and I don't know how does that fit, and it almost feels like I have to hit a threshold here in experience before I can even start to think about this. So how do you fit that into your playbook of basically career navigation? They typically hire only senior developers with a very niche language that's not common here. But I love the work that they do, and they operate out of Europe. So that's one thing I've struggled with on how to like navigate the beginning of my development experience and where I focus myself, because I want to be successful here so I can be successful there, but I don't want to go in 2 directions, if that makes any kind of sense.
Yeah. From a relocation standpoint, if you got an offer today, would you take it?
I'd have to say yes. Like, I mean, because even though it is my like kind of, it's a company that I think fits my values, or I fit it's oh well, I don't know how to phrase that. I would love to work for them, and I think they do great work, but I would also want to use that as like a springboard into, I guess, non-dev work, doing what they do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I want to be in that whole, I guess, genre of work. If that makes sense.
The good thing is I think the things, like all the advice that I gave today, the things people struggle with the most is not knowing what they're working towards. Because like I said, like decide what you're working towards and then go do that thing. But the hard part is actually, or part of the hard part is deciding what you're working towards. So the good thing is you've got a pretty good idea, I think, of what you want and who you want to work for, which means sounds like you've done some research in terms of languages or language that they use. You can invest as much energy as you want to reaching out to people that work at that company, to asking them to tell them about their career and their journey and what it's like to live in the city that they live in Europe. Especially if there's any like expats or transplants or whatever that have done a similar move, to ask them what that was like. And you can ask them if they got a relocation bonus and all the details that come along with it. And you kind of mentioned the dichotomy of working and being successful at what you're doing and then working towards that thing. I want to be really cognizant of telling people they should spend extra time outside of their day job. Because I am the biggest advocate of work-life balance. But if you know that that's the thing that you want, and that's the thing that's gonna like be a game changer for you in your life, and I think about just experiences, like super dramatic, but like by the time I die, like what experiences have I had, and what experiences would be worth it to have gotten it sounds like at this point, this is one of yours. And so it seems like it's worth investing that time outside, whatever it is, outside of your regular
Mhm.
work hours. And so I think you can safely invest in your job at the time that you have for your job, and also invest in yourself with the things that you can do outside of your job with whatever time you have to spend. The other thing is, and I did this a lot, I would say, was I kind of forced overlap in the content that I would take and work through, and the courses that that FedEx would pay for specifically. I forced an overlap with things that I was more interested in that sometimes weren't directly associated with the work that we were doing at FedEx. It helped build my knowledge base, and I could articulate that to a manager to say, hey, we're not using this now, we might. And it also expands my mind to understand how other things work, so it's still beneficial. So you may be able to find some overlap or forced overlap of training material, but I say it sounds like you know what you want. Go and you've done some, do as much research as you can, spend as much time as you can while also maintaining happiness and work-life balance and all those things to go and make it happen.
Cool. I appreciate the answer and the talk today. It's been a while since I've hung out, so it was
I
great to
know.
be here.
If anybody in Memphis, sorry for everyone that's not here. If anybody wants to go get coffee this weekend, let me know.
Let me just see what Delta Airlines has to say about
it.
Quick hop.
For what it's worth, everywhere I fly is through Atlanta, by the way, Kevin. I don't get anywhere from Memphis without going through Atlanta.
Oh, I bet, man. Y'all are the reason it takes me 2 hours to get my check bag out.
Wow. All right, folks, we are going to wrap it up. Again, humongous thank you to James for carving out some time in his very busy schedule to hang out with us here in Code Connector. That was super valuable information. It was recorded. Give me a day or two and I'll post the YouTube link in the Code Connector Slack. Again, mentioning the Slack, if you're not on it now, scroll back up in the chat and definitely join us. Participate in the conversation. Start some tech talks of your own. Tech talks like this or just daily tech conversation. We'd love for you to do that. That is totally awesome. Definitely follow James, man. Yes, he has 126,000 followers on YouTube, but he wants you too. He wants you too. You count too. So go follow him on his YouTube, follow him on Twitter, and his Discord as well. Learn, build, teach. Awesome conversations that go on there. That being said, y'all have a great, safe night, and we'll see you at the next one.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night, y'all.
See ya.
Oh, my.